Haver FM, Howe Community Radio, is supported by the Five Communities Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund through Fife Voluntary Action and the Scottish Government.
Welcome to another instalment in our regular podcast updates tracking the progress of our latest Heids and Herts project, Hearth and Howe. Hearth and Howe is a series of story capturing events taking place across the autumn in a few of the villages our charity serves here in the Howe and across North East Fife. The series is part of the Year of Stories 2022 Community Stories programme, and with fund support from Event Scotland, Museums Galleries Scotland and National Lottery Heritage Fund. Scotland's Year of Stories 2022 is a celebration of stories inspired by, written or created in Scotland. Stories are a vital part of Scotland's culture, and every community has a different tale. A host of events are being held across Scotland this year by community groups like us, museums, culture and heritage organisations and visitor attractions, showcasing our rich storytelling and literary heritage. This podcast is dedicated to Giffordtown resident and former schoolteacher Marion Calley. Marian celebrates her 93rd year in 2022. Retired local GP Doug Wightman volunteered to interview Marian for this special and caught up with her in her care home in Auchtermuchty. Marian was born in Ladybank in 1929. Together with her husband George, they moved to Giffordtown in 1955 and lived there until 2020.
Okay, this is Marion Calley, who's in care home in Auchtermuchty at the moment. Today is the 20th or the 21st, I'm not sure, of October. So tell me, Marion, first of all, do you mind if I ask you, when were you born?
No, 1/3/29.
Okay. And you were born whereabouts?
In Ladybank and Church Street.
And that's where you grew up?
Yeah, no, I grew up most of my life there. Then I moved to Commercial Road.
Right, but you're still in Ladybank?
Yes.
Okay, and you went to school there?
Primary school there.
And then after that?
Bellbaxter.
And when you left Bellbaxter, what did you do?
I went to Dundee Training College for teachers.
Okay, and you became a teacher, first of all, whereabouts?
In Ladybank for 15 years.
Right, and then?
And then I moved to Newburgh for 22 years.
Righto. And you got married when?
1956.
Okay, you got married George, who died
yes.
just 20 years ago now?
I'm sorry?
Is it 20 years since George died?
It'll be 23 now.
Right, okay, so you've been on your own since
yes.
then. And you came to Giffordtown when, Marion?
1956.
Right. Now, I know from what you've told me before that your house was not exactly a show house when you came in 1956.
The house belonged to Marco Valenti, who lived in Leith and kept it as a holiday house.
Is he related to the Valenti chip shop people in Kirkcaldy?
I think maybe far off related.
Right,
And to get the house, we had to go to him and say, would you please sell your house? So we had to...
Was the house for sale at all? Or did you see this house sitting on its own, not used, and you thought, I'd like to live there?
Well, George had been born and brought up in Giffordtown.
Uh-huh.
And there was another house for sale in the village, but we were too late in case it was a lot smaller.
Right.
And we knew that it was empty, and we went to him and said, would you please sell your house? Because he said yes, but we had to give him what he asked.
Okay.
And there was also a pear tree growing outside the sitting room window, and he wouldn't sell us the house till he got compensated by the electricity board for them cutting bits off his pear tree and starting to put an electric pole in his garden.
Right.
And he got £200 compensation, and he wouldn't sell us the house till he got the £200.
That's a lot of money, like that. It's equivalent to about £2,500 now.
And I mean, we paid $550 for the house. And as soon as we got the house, we cut the tree down.
Right. But you must have had a lot to do in the house. For a start, you mentioned electricity. Was there electricity in the house then when you came?
There was a generator in a tin iron shed on the gable, and there was a pole with a windmill on it.
Right.
And whenever we tried it, the first time we tried it, everything blew. Electricity was coming to the village then.
So there was no mains electricity at that
There was
time.
no mains electricity.
And I think you told me that mains water only came in round about that time.
No, it was a lot later mains water came.
So when you moved into that house, your water supply was what, Marion?
There was a well in the garden, which had never been known to go dry.
Right.
And we had an electric pump in the house and a tank up in the loft. And whenever the tank reached a certain level, it switched on and filled it.
Right.
So we had that for quite a long time before mains water came.
So you were, I think you said to me once before that you were among the aristocracy of the village because you had this tank upstairs that you could get water out of the tap.
Yes. Everybody else had to go to a hand pump.
Right. Now tell me about the house. You must have had to make a lot of changes in the house.
I mean, the house was built in 1831 and we had to buy it with the contents.
The contents?
Yes.
The furniture and everything?
Yes.
Was that...
And we got 84 shillings for the contents at Ladybank auction.
Presumably you didn't want any of the contents then?
And the only thing he took was a cocktail bar, and the first pound was framed that he had ever earned.
The cocktail bar? This guy, he was quite a bit of a raver, this guy then.
I had parties there.
Right.
And
did anyone in the village go to these parties?
No, they were nothing to do with it. It was only his friends. And of course there was no toilet.
I think you said that, I remember you telling me that one of his occupation, he made plaster statues and things like that.
Flying geese they put on the wall.
That wasn't all he made, surely.
And the children in the village, they were just pure chalk. And we gave them to the children in the village, and they drew hopscotch and things on the road with them.
What was life like in the village in those days? There must have been a lot of children around.
When we went, there were 19 children. There were big families of 7 to 6 and other children.
And the children just played in the street and in the fields and in the woods.
Yes, they actually played tennis in the street. There wasn't any traffic hardly. And when a car came, they removed the net.
Did anyone in the village have a car?
Yes.
Did you have a car?
No.
No. Right.
Well, later on, the 2 cats adopted us.
Right. So you walked to Ladybank to school?
No, I had a car.
Oh, right, okay.
And George had a minivan.
Right.
And there was a rota, and he gave the children a lift.
To school?
To school.
When you went to school, no, you didn't go, of course, when you were in school in Ladybank, you were living in Ladybank, right, so you didn't, okay. Right.
I was just had to go up the road.
Right. What about the village hall, for example?
In Giffordtown?
Yeah. Were there a lot of events going on in those days?
In those days, the village hall was run by a certain Bunty Cunningham.
Right.
And she took over.
Right.
And ran it. And she wasn't doing very well. And when the villagers called a meeting to start up a new committee,
right.
And she said it wasn't correct now to have another meeting. And Mr. Filt, the minister, was a trustee for the hall, and he read out that the money in the bank was 68, and everyone thought pounds, and it was 68p.
Right, but that was in 1974, if I'm not mistaken. But when you came in the 50s, were there ceilidhs and dances and things like that in the hall still?
Well, she used to have some things, and they had
They did whist drives and beetle drives and things like that. Right. Okay, and were you well attended? Do you know?
No, I mean there weren't much. You know, when she used to have dances. And just issue tickets, write them all right, left and centre,
Right.
and sell them.
Yeah. But then...
when the new committee took over, things were different.
Right. And your husband, George, he was the chairman, and he was very much a driving force in getting things going. And there were regular Calleys and events in the hall after that, weren't there?
Yes, and Bruce Lindsay and Jim Crawford played free of charge. And we were only charging £1. And Bruce said, if you don't charge £2, I'm not going to play.
I find that hard to believe that you were charging £1 in the 1970s, because £1 in the 1970s is equivalent to at least £10 today. And I don't know if people would expect to pay £10 to go to it.
I mean, people played, and children came as well. The hall was packed.
I know, because I've looked at old records for these days, and at some of the events there were 150, they were catering for 150 people. And nowadays the hall's only allowed to have 60 people in it. So
it was absolutely packed.
It must have been.
And you could have orange juice or cider as much as you liked.
Right. I expect you got stuck in about the cider then.
Yes, and there were often stovies. And the Shand family used to come sometimes. And David used to play the drums in the band. And when we had stovies, Jimmy Shand used to say, give me the brown ones that are stuck to the pot.
Right. Connoisseur of these matters then. Tell us another wee story, because I remember I actually told this story at the Heids and Herts meeting. But tell me about the cuddy shed in your back garden.
It was on the back of the house.
Right.
And on the back of the door, it had names and dates. And it was to record when it was during the war, and when the men came home on leave, they had a record, and if any girl was found to be pregnant, they looked up on the door to see who had been at home.
Do you think that was a regular occurrence? Do you think the girls in the village regularly got pregnant?
I don't think so.
No.
But actually, there was a cuddy stayed in it.
Right.
And it belonged to Mary Lindsay, who lived in her husband. And he was gamekeeper or something somewhere.
Right. When you came here in the 50s, the people in the village, what sort of jobs did they do? Can you think of them? I mean, now nearly everybody's either retired or a commuter, but did people live locally who worked there?
When we came in the 50s, lots of people worked on the local farms.
There were still farm workers.
Now, there was the building outside Ladybank is known as the mob store. And it had something to do with defence. Some of them worked there, but a lot of them worked at Scott's Porridge Oats.
Oh, right.
And then later it changed that everybody had a profession or they commuted.
So the kind of people lived in the village has changed a lot in that time. Because when we came here in 1974, shortly after that we had a couple of children, and there was a group of children all about the same age, and that's never been the same since. There's only 2 little children in the village itself now, and there's never been a time since the mid-70s when there was other children about the same age. It's awfully sad. Okay. Anything else you'd like to just talk about?
Well, this was known as the Cuddy House. And that was the site of the bathroom now.
Right.
And Mary Lindsay, her husband must have died, and she lived on her own. And on Old Year's night, she went to her bed to make sure she would be in her bed, because everyone went to First Foot House. And some of the glasses that she laid out were so full, and they put the whiskey in a vase. And she kept seed potatoes under her bed, and it was a straw mattress, and they grew into the mattress.
So why did she have a cuddy? A donkey, presumably?
They used to go about with a cart.
Right, okay. So what about Christmas, for example? What was Christmas like in the village?
We had, there would be a Christmas party of some kind, but I can't remember.
In the house?
No, it would be
in the hall.
In the hall.
Yeah.
And I think Bunty had a Christmas party, but after the new committee took over, there were Christmas parties. And all the children in the village came to us on Christmas morning to show us what Santa had brought, and they got a wee present of our tree. And that happened every Christmas.
Right. And what was New Year like?
The New Year.
Were you first footing and all that?
Yeah, and at the New Year, everyone used to watch television, the White Heather Club, and these things.
You mean you had televisions?
Yes, but and after that, we went out first footing, and George took his van, and we went down to Stony Briggs, and Mrs. McEwen had hot cootie dumpling ready, and we'd all got a piece of hot cootie dumpling. Then when we had been there, we moved on to what is now Jacob's Cross, to Mrs. Lawson's, and we got potted meat sandwiches.
Right.
And after that, we left there and we came to the village, and we either first met people in the street or we first footed people in their homes, and we got home about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Those were the days. I don't think anyone would have the stamina for that nowadays. There's certainly no first footing has gone on in the village for years.
And the next morning, the Donaldson family came along with ginger cordial to give us our New Year.
Right. I used to get ginger cordial from my grandma when I was
Yes.
the nippy stuff. Okay, well that was really nice hearing about these things, Marion. I'm sure there might be somebody that might be of interest to other people, so thanks very much. I'll call along to that.
Giving the community a voice. Haver FM. Howe Community Radio.